your ideas of college and university life revolve around thriving, carefree, academically competent adolescents, it may be time to revise your knowledge of the conditions within the average post-secondary education environment. Believe it or not, homelessness has become a growing concern for many institutions as secret societies of homeless students have begun to form in campuses across the nation in recent years. According to the National Association for the Education of Homeless Children and Youth, a noticeable increase in the amount of homeless students nationwide has taken place. Universities such as UCLA have revealed in recent years that they took notice of a growing number of students sleeping in student lounge areas and using locker rooms as daily showers. They admit, however, that it's difficult to get an exact number of displaced students because many attempt to disguise their financial straits and an attempt to fit in with their affluent environment. Most of us categorize homelessness to fit the mold of the sign holders we see in the intersections. However, there are growing numbers of displaced or transient students who look and function exactly as students who have a residence.
So let me ask you this. You just gave a nice example of how change can happen. So I'm going to step over that line here. And I'm being biased. I'll be the first to admit to my listening audience, I am being biased about this particular person because I want to see some positive changes take place over on the West Side.
In October of 2011, Central California's free speech talk radio program, Keeping It Real with Dr. Gene Kennedy, discussed the subject of college homelessness. During their program, they introduced listeners to the story of a 19-year-old Fresno City College student by the name of Patric Rojas, who is currently struggling to find permanent residence. In an exclusive on-campus interview with Keeping It Real's Julius Chatone, Patric discussed the plethora of obstacles he's had to overcome in life as a child with absent parents. It was in a very casual manner that Patric discussed the non-existent relationship he has with a mother who struggled with a drug addiction and a father whom he'd recently met for the first time in September of 2011.
I haven't had a relationship with my mom because she's never been in my life. And my dad just recently came back into my life today.
Why?
I don't know. Well, he said he always wanted to be around, but my grandma and mom wouldn't let him come around me. I don't know why they didn't want him around. They just preferred it that way. They said that he wasn't good for me.
Patric was raised by a loving grandmother who apparently spoiled her grandson, gave him all the affection he could ever ask for, and protected him from harm. Her death, which came when Patric was 13 years old, resulted in the devastated teen being taken in by his Aunt Karina and Uncle Lamar, who already had a house full of small children.
It hit me really hard because my grandma was like my mom and my everything, and I don't know, she was always there for me when I needed it, and she did take care of me throughout my whole life. And then after she passed, I went from going to having everything I needed and wanted, because she did kind of spoil me, to another family with other siblings, and it was just hard to adapt to that.
As the oldest in the household, Patric was no longer the center of attention and had to adjust to the responsibilities of being an older brother figure to his cousins.
It's just all the attention wasn't always on me. I had to realize that I'm not the only one in the house, and that there was like 6 others of us that she had to pay attention to, and it wasn't just me anymore. And since I was the oldest, I had to take on responsibilities and teach others how to clean or cook, or I just had to be the older sibling and guide them.
In recent years, Patric went on a personal journey of self-discovery, which led him to identify and accept his sexual orientation as a homosexual male. In an attempt to define his affiliation, Patric came out to his aunt and uncle, which ultimately had a huge impact on their relationship. Derogatory comments and disapproving glances from the only family he had left resulted in Patric being thrown out of the last place he was able to call home.
They've always known I was, but I just never admitted to it. They asked me a few times, but I always said no. But since I finally admitted it, saying that I was, then they were like, we don't approve, we don't like that, because they were Christian or whatnot. So I felt like if I did tell them, then it would just be all bad. But one day I was just like, I don't want to hide it anymore. I was just looked at different now that they knew I was, or like they would make certain comments, or I don't know, just make me feel uncomfortable to even be at that house or to be around them or talk with them. They said that they don't approve of my lifestyle, and they see that I don't want to change, and that they're not going to allow someone that is gay to be in their house because they feel like I'm bringing spirits and different types of attitudes into the house, and so they're not going to allow that. And as long as I choose to be gay, that I can't live there, so I have to get my things and go. Honestly, I don't know, but the way I've been brought up around them and in that church, I don't know. Like, I'm led to believe that, okay, being gay is wrong, and that's it.
Patric now bounces from one friend's house to the next, sleeping on couches and in beds of people whom he has convinced himself are trustworthy. In our exclusive interview, Patric revealed to me that he has clothes at 3 different people's houses, and that he never leaves in the morning without taking a bag filled with toiletries and a change of clothes for the following day. Just one of the many consequences of never knowing where your next place will be to sleep. It may seem odd, but Patric's living circumstances haven't altered his desires to remain as social as any of his other college peers. Believe it or not, one of Patric's main coping mechanisms happens to be frequenting the gay nightclub scene.
When I'm in the club, I feel like all stress and all tension is just lifted off me because I get to dance and feel free. I don't know, I just feel free when I dance and I go to the club and do that there. I'm not going to dance in my room by myself with music. I like to be in a club setting and dance with other people. And it's also an opportunity to meet other people too. When I was with my grandma, I've always been so sheltered. So after she passed, I began to open up and like just hang out with more friends and meet new people, and like just became an outgoing person because I don't like to be inside all the time. I like to be active and go to social gatherings. I believe the more friends I make, the more opportunities I have, because you never know who you might meet or come across, and friends can also be great connections to get you into places or help you out in certain things. I don't think I'll ever be independent. I think I'm going to be dependent. Yeah, I really need somebody.
Alone.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I believe it is easier for them because they have the help and the support of a family, as opposed to someone like me who has to try and do it on my own. Yeah, there is a limit to what friends can do, and I know my friends can't help me with everything that I need or situations that I'm in, and I know I have to do it on my own, but it'll come around.
Many of the people Patric stays with have been contacts he's made at the clubs. There are many risks, however, in putting oneself in an unknown or unfamiliar environment, and for many in Patric's situation, there are usually prices to pay in exchange for a good night's sleep. Studies have shown that 28% of street youth and 10% of sheltered youth have engaged in survival sex, which is the act of exchanging sex for a place to stay. PubMed.gov states that male street youth involved in survival sex are at a higher risk for HIV than their non-involved peers. NNForYouth.org states that suicide is the leading cause of death among street youth. Yet, while mental health problems are prevalent amongst homeless youth, it is only a very small portion of these youth, a mere 9% at best, that have actually accessed mental health services. So as homelessness amongst college youth begins to increase, we may begin to see rises in crime, survival sex, and fatality as students go into survival mode and resort to dangerous methods to survive and avoid sleeping on the streets.
So I appreciate you taking time out to keep this on our radar so that we can...
Dr. Thomas Russell, a psychologist affiliated with the Los Angeles Unified School District, joined the discussion on Keeping It Real with Dr. Gene Kennedy. As a guest of the show, Mr. Russell shared information to enlighten listeners on some of the psychological hurdles that students like Patric experience as a result of their circumstances.
Well, you know, I love the fact that you're talking about this issue because when I was a young man, around 25, I was homeless in Atlanta.
Wow.
And I remember calling my aunt, asking her, needing some help, and she was living in Pasadena. And one of the things she told me was, go get a job and go to school, and hung up the phone. And
Wow.
At the time, I was a single parent, and it devastated me. And to the point where, at the age of 28, I began to go to school. I received a bachelor's degree in human services with a minor in psychology at 31. From there, I went to San Diego State and graduated at 35, and went to Los Angeles Unified School District. When I went there, and I'm originally from Watts, I began to look at the impoverishedness, I began to look at the homelessness, and I began to think about what I went through. And so what I did is I began to say, in order to really affect young people, you have to tell the story. Not only do you have to tell the story, you have to go different places. So what I did is I went back to the Midwest, and I did group homes where kids was homeless, and they were in foster care. And then I went to Illinois, and then I went back to L.A. I worked at the hardest schools in Los Angeles, Washington High School, and now I'm in foster care where I do the foster care kids and the homeless children in Los Angeles.
I'd like to get some insight on what an adolescent goes through, just developmentally wise. We're dealing with an 18 to 24 age range, usually with college students, and I'm curious to know, what are some of the developmental things that a student goes through in that age range?
Well, let's start with this, and let's everybody on the phone take it back when you were 18 to 24. It's going to be a little different because you were in a different era.
Yes.
We are in a different era now than the kids. The generation is called Generation X, Generation Y, and Generation Unknown. Those are from 18 to 24. They have no clue how to transition from high school to young adulthood.
Wow.
When I'm in the schools, one of the things that I tell the school administrators is, how are you going to transition these young men and young women from 18 actually to 25? And really, there's no solutions in the school system right now. A lot of people want to deal with how do we look at it from 18 to 24, but let me bring some things at you. Psychologically, mentally, emotionally, and physically, and academic growth, it's kind of stunted because right now, young people don't know where to go. They don't have resources. They don't have mentorship. They don't have an understanding from 16 to 18 what it really looked like being on your own. And so what happens is they psychologically go into community college and they drop out. And they psychologically go into, let's say, transition housing where they get an apartment, and they don't know about credit. They don't know about finance and checking, and they didn't do that in high school. And so they fail. And it affects their self-esteem. It affects their self-efficacy. And they wind up asking the question, who am I and who am I going to be?